at home and in work. Check out tipperarywater.ie for more. Tipperary Pure Irish Water.
Of its own. The Ball, Sunday afternoons on Dublin City FM.
And now it's time to go to our regular slot with the Notre Dame Collegiate American Football Team. It's my great pleasure to welcome back to the programme Len Clark. How are you doing, Len?
Hi, Declan. How are you doing? I have to laugh because I got a phone call from Brian Kelly, your audio engineer, and for a second there I thought it was the Notre Dame football coach, Brian Kelly, calling me.
Well, there you go. We actually have a piece of audio, thanks to your good self, with the other Brian Kelly to bring to our listeners today. So we'll get to the matter in hand. Before we start with the news about the game, I actually met the alumni based in Dublin during the week.
You met with them?
I met with them Thursday, yeah.
Well, tell me about that experience. They're a great group, and they're very passionate about Notre Dame football, so I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts about meeting up with the Notre Dame group.
They're terrific, and we met with some of the kids who are over here on those exchange programs in Trinity and stuff like that. So there was a few of them who were at it as well, and it was really good, and they were all looking forward to going to see the big game last night in there's a bar called the Woolshed, which is an Australian-owned bar, and they're showing the Notre Dame games this season.
And it must have been a late night for him. By the time the game got over, it had to be about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning your time.
Yeah, I reckon it was, yeah. I wasn't able to join them myself because I had a bit of car trouble this week, so I had to pass on it this week, you know.
Not where you started, it's where you finished, so hopefully you'll get your car situated out. Notre Dame might get their team focused again. It was a win yesterday, Declan, but you would have thought in the post-game press conference that Notre Dame had lost.
Yeah, I got from the notes that you sent on that they were expected to win by a huge margin, and they ended up winning by only 8 points.
24-16 was the final score, but everybody expected Notre Dame to score 40 to 50 points and to keep the Ball State scoring very low, but it was just a strange afternoon as opposed to last week where it was a night game, national television, ESPN game day. The weather was very hot last week. Yesterday in the afternoon, even the fans were not as excited as they were last week. The weather was a little bit colder, and I think people just walked out saying, we survived this game. But a lot of improvement needs to be done by this Notre Dame team. But what a difference a week makes. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed in watching the game yesterday was the offensive line that protected quarterback Brandon Wimbush so well against Michigan last week. Brandon Wimbush was sacked 4 times. Being sacked means is that he is tackled behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And so they were in the backfield all afternoon harassing Brandon Wimbush.
And that usually means that he doesn't get a chance to get the ball away in time.
That's true, but it also means that with the pressure on him, he had to make a quick play, and he was intercepted 3 times yesterday. That is a turnover when he throws the ball and the opposition catches the ball. But if you take a look at the stats yesterday, 297 yards passing by Brandon Wimbush, that's the best performance he has ever had, but it was kind of clouded by the interceptions and just the way the team performed. So a little bit of a positive, but a lot of things to work on going into next week. So
you have 2 narrow victories, relatively speaking. I mean, one by a single score, and yesterday's game. Is it a question of maybe it's taking time for the guys to get going?
You know, it could be a number of different things. I just think after last week, with all the hype and the adrenaline, the excitement, I don't know if the players thought they were a little bit better than they were. It's some days you.
Hello, Len.
Broadcasters, we have a bad show, but yesterday Notre Dame just did not play up to their potential and the standards that Notre Dame has set. Okay, now obviously they have a game next week again, do they? They play next Saturday at home, the 3rd straight home game, and they play Vanderbilt, which is a private school in Nashville, Tennessee, and a member of the SEC Conference, the Southeastern Conference. And teams that play in that conference are Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Arkansas, and Alabama, which is traditionally one of the best teams in the country. And so it's a very tough conference, although Vanderbilt has not been a football power over the past couple of years. But anytime a major conference opponent comes into Notre Dame Stadium, much like Ball State is, this is their Super Bowl, and they play above and beyond the expectation. So it will be another tough game next week for Notre Dame.
But I think because Vanderbilt lock horns with those bigger colleges as well, that they will be a little bit more maybe battle hardened, I suppose.
You're exactly right, because Vanderbilt always wins one game that they're not expected to during the year, and they always surprise a lot of folks. So this is not a gimme game, but it's another chance for Notre Dame to improve as we progress into the season, because after the Vanderbilt game, Notre Dame goes on the road for the first time this year, and it's always tough to win at an opponent's stadium.
Now, how many road games do they have in succession before they return home again?
Well, that's the one thing about this schedule is that I don't believe they have more than 2 away games at one time. That means they come back to Notre Dame for one game and then go back on the road. So they go to Wake Forest, which is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They come back and play Stanford, which is located in California, and then they go back to the East Coast and play Virginia Tech. And so a lot of travel, but coming back and getting a break from going on the road 2 consecutive weeks kind of helps in terms of scheduling.
Now, so it's going to be a tough schedule. Fair enough. Like from the travel point of view, do they have any guys who've been out hurt, who've missed the first couple of games, who can come back into the roster?
That is a great question. There was an injury yesterday to the tight Cole Kmet. He left the game, and it looked like it was a left ankle injury. And in the post game, it was kind of chaotic in the post game. Nobody ever really asked about the status of the health of Cole Kmet. An hour, Coach Kelly will be meeting with local members of the media via telephone to give an injury update. That's what they usually do, is to give an injury update on Sunday, and then we have a better idea of what the roster is going to be going into the week. But I'm glad you mentioned that question, because going into the Ball State game, I said there were 3 keys for Notre Dame to win. The first was continued improvement, and they did not do that. Number 2 and number 3 are the same, and that was to stay healthy. You don't want to get hurt against an opponent like Ball State. But if they lose Cole Kmet, that's a big loss, because he is a tight end, and a tight end is a person on the line who blocks but also goes out and looks to receive passes from the quarterback.
Yeah, so they kind of have a dual role, really, don't they?
Depending on the play that is being called, but Cole is a great kid, a great athlete, and losing him, that's some big shoes to fill on that offensive line.
Now, there's a phenomenon in colleges football whereby players come into a place like a university, one of the highly rated NCAA colleges, and they're literally one and done. They get drafted at the end of 1 year. Has that happened a lot to Notre Dame in recent years?
No, that usually happens more in the sport of basketball. That's becoming a problem with schools that are very good. Let's say Kentucky in basketball. For the past couple of years, they've had players that will come in. They're very highly touted. They'll play 1 year, and then they're offered an NBA contract for millions of dollars, and they leave. In football, Notre Dame has a saying, it's not a 4-year commitment, which is usually the length of time and the eligibility to play football. You have 4 seasons and basically 4 or 5 years to graduate if you're redshirted. But at Notre Dame, it's a 40-year commitment, because they know there is life after college football. And you're going to go into the workforce, and you're going to work for 40 years. So if a player leaves Notre Dame, it usually is he transfers to maybe get more playing time, because he is not with the first or second team.
Okay.
And over the past couple of years, there have been some players that have left because they want to be a player on the field as opposed to sitting on the bench. But as far as leaving for the NFL, usually a player will leave in their junior year, and last year a couple of players did leave. Josh Adams, a running back.
Hello? Yeah.
They forgo their final year of eligibility to go to the NFL and go after some big dollars.
Okay. But most of the time they kind of see out their education and they get some kind of a qualification before they get drafted.
Yes, because of the academic standards at Notre Dame, you have to qualify academically, and a lot of individuals will come there because they are using the playing of football for the education, and so that applies at the University of Notre Dame.
Okay, Len, we're going to play these pieces of interview, but I want to introduce them using the information that you supplied to me very, very kindly. The first interview is with Sam. How do you pronounce his surname, Sam?
Sam Mustafer, and he is the offensive center. He is the individual who will snap the ball to the quarterback, and he is really the anchor of the offensive line.
Okay, and this is a short piece with Sam Mustafa, who was the starting offensive centre, and he was talking about how disappointed he was with the offensive line play during that game.
I mean, a win's a win. You take the lessons, you can learn from it. Obviously, we got to be more assignment and technique sound, and execution is the big main focus. I've been on the opposite end of some gut-wrenching losses, so it definitely feels a little bit different. So.
Next up, we speak to Coach Brian Kelly, and he was talking about how a win is a win, but he states that the team needs to improve, and that begins with him and being a better coach, basically.
Well, we're happy to win the game. This is about winning games, and that'll be our second win. And winning for us is what the goal is each and every week. So we accomplished that. Now, let's look at the things that we have to do, which there's a number of things we have to do better. First of all, is we've got to coach better. We got to prepare our football team better, and that starts with me. I got to prepare our team better. I think Ball State did a great job of coming into this game and doing exactly what they needed to do. Possess the football. I think they had 90-something plays. Ball control. They ate up clock. They did the things necessary to be in a position to compete.
Now, next up is quarterback Brandon Wimbush, and he says the team did not play up to the Notre Dame standard against Ball State last night.
You want to win to Notre Dame standard. We hold ourselves to a high standard, and Coach Kelly and the rest of the coaching staff emphasizes that every day, and we clearly didn't play to our standard today.
Yeah, Len, it pretty much sounds like the sort of post-game audio you'd get from a team that had narrowly lost.
Well, Declan, you've been in a lot of locker rooms, and you've seen teams after a loss. You're exactly right. It did feel like Notre Dame lost. You take the word win out of Brian Kelly's mouth, it felt like a loss. And so Notre Dame won, but in a sense they did lose because they did not play up to the standards.
Might this be the sort of wake-up call they need going into the Vanderbilt game?
Well, I hope so, definitely, against a team like Ball State that when you take a look in the FBS, there are 128. Notre Dame is rated the 8th best out of those 128. This is definitely going to send a message saying, hey, we're not as good as that number 8 ranking, and we hope it's a wake-up call that they can come out and improve the next week and get another win. But the great thing about looking at a record is that a win is a win. You don't see all the mistakes that were played in the game. When you take a look at the standings, right now Notre Dame is 2-0.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what counts, because the target is to try and reach that bowl at the end of the campaign.
Exactly right. You win, there's a chance to get a better bowl bid and to play on New Year's Day or to possibly play for a national championship. But what we saw yesterday against Ball State, Notre Dame is not ready for that level of bowl competition. But there are still a lot of games left to be played. You've got 10 more games, and right now Notre Dame is off to 2-0. It's a lot better than being 1-1 or 0-2. But as Coach Brian Kelly said, they need to coach better. They need to improve, and we'll see what happens next Saturday against Vanderbilt.
Now, how are Vanderbilt doing so far? Are they? Do you have a handle on their record so far?
Haven't had a chance. I'm much like the coaches.
Yeah.
Let's get through Ball State, and then we begin our preparation on Sunday and Monday to take a look. But traditionally, Vanderbilt has always been like an underdog. They've always had great wide receivers, great quarterbacks, and it's a very highly academic school as well, like Notre Dame. So they're smart kids, and they find a way to get things done. And so when you put two great academic institutions together, anything could happen. Notre Dame will experience a similar opponent down the road when they play Northwestern in Chicago this year. Northwestern is another private school, which means that they're not supported by state funds. Vanderbilt is private, being located in Nashville, Tennessee. But they're very similar to Notre Dame. They recruit the same types of kids, and that's the one thing at the end of the game when you walk on the field, most of the players on both sides of the ball know each other already. So it'll be very interesting to see players who maybe have played at the same high school together and to see how they performed against each other.
Now, so this Vanderbilt challenge would have been a challenge anyway, but given that they were disappointed with how they performed in Game 2, it's an even bigger mountain to climb.
Well, we talked about this, is that because of the tradition of Notre Dame, anytime an opposing team comes into Notre Dame Stadium, this is their bowl game. This is their Super Bowl. Ball State, this was the first time they've ever played at Notre Dame Stadium. They brought a lot of fans. The schools are only located 110, 120 miles away from each other.
Which is a short commute in U.S. standards, yeah.
It is, and they played above and beyond. Now, they might go out next week and play a conference opponent and get beat by 40 points. But when they played Notre Dame, it was the perfect storm. Everything was going their way. They made a couple of mistakes. Notre Dame capitalized on those mistakes. Jalen Elliott, the defensive back, had 2 interceptions, and Notre Dame turned those turnovers into points. So 14 of the 24 points were based off of turnovers by Ball State. So Ball State kind of did some things to allow Notre Dame to really take over the game. But the first series, Notre Dame scored in less than a minute, and we thought it was going to be that blowout. But give credit to Ball State. Their kids were competitive. They were hungry. They made the adjustments. They turned it into a whale of a ball game.
So basically what you're telling me there is that the creative offense only generated 10 points. The other 14 came from turnovers.
That's right, because the Ball State defense really held Notre Dame at bay. And here's another interesting stat. The Ball State offense ran 97 plays. Now, in a typical college football game, the opposition will usually run 60. So that means the Notre Dame defense was on the field a long time. And Ball State was just wearing Notre Dame down. But once again, Declan, we talked last week about the conditioning of Notre Dame. I think the one thing that really helped Notre Dame in that ball game is that they were well conditioned and they were able to compete for 4 quarters, and that might have been a difference in the game. Yeah, sometimes those kind of energy reserves can tell a tale, particularly in the closing minutes of the final quarter. And without the adrenaline, like in the Michigan game last week, it was probably even tougher on the defense because the stadium was not as loud as it was last week, and it was just a bad day all around. The fans weren't into the game. The media weren't into the game. The players weren't into the game, and we hope that's going to be rectified this week. Now, you were saying that it was a lot cooler. It was during the day. I mean, I know there's a special atmosphere when you're playing under floodlights. You know, we've all seen those shows about what it's like to be at a college football game in on a Friday night or a Saturday night when it's dark and the floodlights are there. There's a real special atmosphere. But do you think that affected the playing of the game? I do. I think when you're playing prime time, it just kind of gives you a little bit of extra adrenaline. This game was an afternoon game, as you said, a little bit cooler. It was football weather. But next week against Vanderbilt, it's going to even be an earlier start. The game against Ball State started at 3:30 Eastern time. Okay. Next week, it's going to be a 2:30 kickoff. Right. And that's really dictated by television. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Time. Yeah. But Notre Dame will play, I think, 3 more night games. The night games, as you said, when you play in prime time, you just kind of you just come out and play a little bit harder. But it's difficult because the games go so late into the night, and by the time we get done with our stories, it's 3:00 in the morning. And our fans over in Dublin who are watching the games at one of the pubs around the city center, they're going to be probably eating breakfast by the time the game is over. Yeah, they probably would be at that stage, and like I'm not sure how many of those kind of games they're going to actually going to be able to go to, because you need a special license to kind of serve beer after certain hours in here, and so therefore they'd have to go to some place that had something else on as well, that had a license extension for that purpose. Well, the other thing I can tell you is, Declan, we did get a little publicity in the South Bend Tribune. They had a nice little blurb with your name in there and telling individuals in the South Bend area and the Notre Dame community about the program going on in Dublin. And I was asked a few times by individuals saying, how about that? I have a friend that's over there right now. And I said, hey, turn on Dublin City FM and listen to the show. Well, that's fantastic, because we're looking forward to bringing this to our listenership, and indeed any expats from the area that want to tune in, they're more than welcome. And we'll be doing this every week. Now, we're going to be moving at the end of September to a little earlier, because like from 5:30 on, I think, the first Sunday in October, we're going to have a results show. So this slot's going to move to an earlier time, round about 5 to 5:15. And we'll sort that out between yourself and myself between now and then we'll have that as our regular slot going forward. Well, I say you're the quarterback, and you just make the audible and run the play.
Yeah, we might go 5 o'clock because that way, if we do run a bit late, then we have the leeway to do it. If you follow me.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Len, on the program, and best of luck to the Fighting Irish against the Vanderbilters. They're a university founded by a very wealthy person, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, I believe is his name, and he founded it. He wanted to create a school that would be a model of all over the world, and Vanderbilt is primarily known for their medical center in Nashville, and so they do a lot of great work in terms of cancer research, and it's right there in the Music City, and I've been down on the campus a few times. It's not like the Notre Dame campus, but it is very special as well.
And they probably specialize, I suppose, in turning out medical professionals.
A lot of medical professionals, and occasionally a football player, too.
Well, there you go. Len, on that note, we're going to leave it for this week, but we look forward to talking to you again next week.